Welcome back everybody to linuxacademy.com. My name is Terry, and in today's course we continue our preparation for the Linux Foundation Certified System Administration exam. We're going to be working again within our mail services section, and specifically today we're going to be talking about configuring an SMTP server. Now, as we talked about in our previous video on email aliases, our SMTP service is going to be handled by Postfix. And Postfix, by default, should be installed and running on most Linux distributions. Generally, even the network distribution, although minimal distributions, may need you to do a sudo yum or apt-get install on Postfix. In this case, we can verify that it's running by doing a psaux postfix, and we see that it's running. Our primary directory that we're going to be working within is the postfix directory inside etc. And you'll remember we created the aliases in our previous video that contains the users that we want to receive emails when we send them to certain accounts. When we ran the postfix create on the database file, the aliases db was created, and that's actually not going to make a lot of sense in terms of what it looks like. So we create databases from within Postfix as we do configurations, and we'll run into that again as we complete the configuration for our Postfix SMTP service. So right now what we want to do is we want to go into the main configuration file, and if we list our directory, it's listed conveniently enough as main.cf. So if we go into our main.cf file, we're looking for a couple of things. The first thing is we're looking for my origin. And my origin is simply the domain that is going to appear in any message that's sent from this server. Sometimes you'll see the my origin defined, especially in cPanel-based systems, as the etc mail name file. And the mail name file just contains a list of that particular mail host. In our case, we do not have, by default, the mail name, although we could create it, is listed there. So in our case, we're just going to say my origin is going to simply say the value of our host, which in this case is going to be tcox6.mylabserver.com. tcox6 just happens to be the name of the server that I happen to be using from a Linux Academy lab server perspective. So any labs will, or any emails will then appear to be coming from user@tcox6.mylabserver.com. So now that we have the my origin set, then we need to set the my destination. So let's do a search on my destination. Now the my destination parameter is what domains this machine will send mail to locally instead of forwarding to another machine. Otherwise known as acting as a relay system. In our case, the default setting should be okay, but we'll add a specific my destination. So my destination, my host name, localhost.mydomain, and localhost. That's fine. If you want to add specifically, we can cover ourselves by saying also tcox6 and tcox6.mylabserver.com, which should be covered by the host name here and the local host and my domain. But in this case, we're going ahead and expanding it to be the entire gamut of systems. So now that we've got that, we can go ahead and save the file. And we need to also go to a transport file. In the transport directory, it defines relationships between domains and the next server which mail services or mail messages should be forwarded to. Since we're only going to be delivering messages in our LAN, and as a result bypassing DNS resolution, we'll have a very simple configuration. So let's do a vim on the transport file, and we'll go all the way down here to the end. And right down here, all we're going to do is we're going to add the following. We're going to say tcox6. And we're going to say it's just local. We're going to say tcox6.mylabserver.com is also local. And then we have to do the reverse. So tcox6, the .tcox6 local, and .tcox TK6.mylabserver.com will also be local. And don't forget the colon on the back of each of those. So now what we have to do, once we've configured those items, so we've set our origin with our host names and the host of the system itself. We've set our destination, and we're indicating that we're doing local, so we're doing local resolution. So one of the things we probably want to do is we want to go into Vim Etsy hosts, and we want to make sure that we have our IP address added here. Although in our case, because we with Linux Academy, we're luckily adding DNS as soon as you boot the server up, just to make sure we don't have any issues here. We're going to do tcox6 mylabserver.com and tcox6. That way we're covered and that IP address is added. And then we have to create another database by running a postmap command. So let's clear this and do a postmap on Etsy postfix transport. And what this will do is it reads the entire configuration that we've just gone through from within our configuration file, the main.cf, as well as this transport file, and it creates an internal database that postfix uses to route mail between the locations that we indicated from the hosts and on the domains that we indicated. If there's a problem here, it'll tell us during the postmap database creation. So now that that has been completed, if we take a look, we see we've got the transport database as well as the aliases database. Our main configuration works just fine, and we can check that we didn't have a problem or what it would have looked like if we go to main, for example, and let's eliminate that equal sign and rerun that post command. The postmap tells us that we've got a fatal configuration, and it tells us exactly what we're missing, which is this equal sign. So let's go back into our configuration file. We'll add back in the equal sign. We rerun our postmap command, and we've got our database successfully created. Now, be careful when you do that because it overwrites the database. So if you have any issue, any belief that you may accidentally be deleting things, one of the things that you can do prior to that is back up those databases, and then you can just copy them over if you've got a configuration problem with any of them when you're creating the new database configurations. There's a number of other items in the configuration file that tells us things like our subnet, which is under My Network. So if we take a look at our configuration real quick, if we take a look at My Networks, it gives us things like the subnet that we're going to. We're leaving the default, which is simply the subnet of the subnetwork as the local machine. We can look at relay domains, which specifies a destination that emails need to be sent to. We're leaving the default value alone, which is the my destination value. So if we look at the relay destination, it's not even defined in here, but it's the my definition. We could put a relay underscore domain, for example, which would tell us what destination the system will be sending it to. In our case, the relay domain by default is the my destination, which we've already defined and we're going to leave alone. And then, of course, we could look at the INET interfaces, which would mean which interfaces is this particular process going to be bound to. And in our case, the internet interfaces by default are bound to all of the network interfaces on the system. So internal LAN ID as well as external internet IP if they're bound on multiple addresses. We can also define our mailbox sizes and limits here, and all of these things, once they're configured, need to be compiled into that database by running the postmap to the transport file. It seems strange that you would run postmap on transport instead of on the main.cf, but those configuration files, main and master, are actually read as part of the database configuration process for the postmap command. So now that we've got email aliases set up, we've got our postfix configuration so that this particular server can send mail to the local network and be recognized as the domain authority for that particular email locally, then what we have left is we're going to set up IMAP and IMAP-S. We're going to talk about how we restrict access to the SMTP service itself. and then we'll configure a client to take a look at how we can send and receive email using our new postfix SMTP service. But for configuring our SMTP server, that's all there is to it. My name is Terry for Linux Academy.